story. There is terror in Austin, Texas tonight. 3 package bombs left on doorsteps, 2 people dead and 2 critically injured this evening. And the manhunt to stop the next bomb could be anywhere and is underway. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum. Governor Greg Abbott is now offering a $15,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of anyone responsible for these bombings. The first bomb took the life of a 39-year-old man. And then today, 10 days later, as the police chief was warning the public after another explosion this morning, right after he spoke, another package exploded. A 17-year-old boy is now dead, and 2 women were injured. All of the explosions occurred when people were doing what everybody does every single day, went out to their front steps and picked up a package. Here's Austin Police Chief Brian Manley just a short time ago.
What we know has happened on this incident, similar to the other 2 incidents, the one both from this morning and the one that occurred back on March 2nd, is that the victim in this incident came outside of her residence and found a package out front, and she picked up that package, and at that point the explosion, the box detonated. This again is the 3rd in what we believe to be related incidents that have occurred over the past 10 days, and we are imploring the community, if you know anything about these attacks, it is imperative that you come forward and that you let us know. We are having innocent people getting hurt across this community, and it is important that we come together as a community and solve this. It's not time to panic, but it's time to be vigilant, and it's time to pay attention. It's time to pull together as a city and a community and solve this.
Chief Manley joins us exclusively tonight on The Story in his first televised interview on this. He will be here in just a moment. First, let's go to Trace Gallagher, who has the backstory for us from our West Coast newsroom tonight. Trace.
Martha, at 6:45 this morning, a 17-year-old boy found a package on the front step, brought it inside the kitchen to open, where it exploded, killing him and injuring a 40-year-old woman. It's unclear if that was his mom. Here's a neighbor describing what it sounded like. Watch.
It was just a loud boom. And, just couldn't figure out what it was. I thought it was my heater exploding or something like that. It was just very loud.
Very loud and very powerful, and very similar to the package bomb that killed a 39-year-old man on March 2nd. And just as police were investigating the parallels of the first 2 bombs, a 3rd package exploded, severely injuring a 75-year-old woman. Now investigators are in the process of establishing any patterns. For example, they believe the explosive devices are similar and were delivered in similar-sized boxes, though they will not go into detail. We know the first 2 explosions happened about 12 miles apart. The 3rd bomb went off 5.5 miles from the second. Both victims who died are African American. The 75-year-old female, who is now in critical condition, is Hispanic. Police are not ruling anything out, but they say it's too early to tell if the victims were the intended targets or if these might be hate crimes. Surveillance cameras near the locations are now being scanned to see if the video captured any potential suspects. The packages do not appear to have been delivered by the Postal Service or shipping companies like FedEx and UPS, and police are now telling everyone in and around the Austin area that if a box shows up at your home and you were not expecting one, call 911. We should note the South by Southwest Music Festival is this weekend in Austin. So far, there are no plans to change that. And back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Ted Kaczynski mailed and planted several package bombs around the country that killed 3 and injured several more. It took investigators nearly 18 years to bring him to justice. Martha.
Awful, terrifying situation. Trace, thank you very much. So here now, exclusively tonight on The Story, Austin Police Chief Brian Manley. Chief, good to see you. These have all been dropped off at night or overnight, you think, and then around 6:45, 7 a.m., the people had opened their doors and picked these up, correct?
Yes, in the first 2, what we had was the victims came out on their porch in the early morning hour and found the packages on their porch. And when they picked them up, or in the second incident, when they brought it inside and opened it up, both of those packages detonated. The one that happened this afternoon was in a little bit of a later hour, but under the same circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, we pointed out, you were out there telling people what to be cautious of. You know, your heart must have just sunk when they said to you, Chief, we got another one. everyone. There's a 17-year-old boy who just died. One exploded in his hands.
Yes, I can't explain to you what that feeling is like, because we're trying to get the message out as quickly as possible, letting people know that based on what we had happen on March 2nd, which we thought at that time was an isolated incident, and then what we had happen this morning, we realized the importance of getting a message out and getting it out quickly. And in the process of getting that message out, to hear that we in fact did have a third incident occur was very troubling, given that we've now lost 2 lives to this.
It's horrible. You've talked about video surveillance. Have you been able to find on the video surveillance any person walking up to any of those steps? Have you got an ID or a look at anybody yet?
Not yet, but as you can imagine, with this having begun this morning and then with the second incident shortly thereafter, we are in the process of painstakingly doing post-blast analysis, picking up all the various pieces of evidence that are strewn throughout both scenes, and included in that will be a canvass of the neighborhoods for anyone who may have witnessed something or any surveillance cameras that may exist in either of these neighborhoods, so that we can hopefully get something to start working with.
I mean, somewhere in your area, obviously, you've got somebody who's building bombs and putting them in packages. And this person is out there. Do you know or have any sense of whether or not it's one person or a group of people, and how sophisticated are these explosive devices?
So whether it's one individual or multiple, we don't know at this time. And as far as sophistication, it takes a certain level of skill to be able to build a device like this and then deploy it to your intended target without having it explode in the process. We're seeing how easily they explode once the victims are handling them. So there is a certain level of skill that is going along with what this individual or individuals are doing.
But can you tell us anything about the technique or the kind of explosive?
So there's a lot of analysis being done by the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Division, along with the FBI, as far as the types of explosives that are being used. That is still being analyzed. But what we're doing, and the message we want to get out, is don't limit yourself to thinking that it's only if an unexpected cardboard box shows up. If you go out on your porch and you see something that does not belong to you, a package or other item, then just give us a call, because we want to come out and we want to take a look at it to ensure that there's nothing suspicious or nothing that we need to do as a department to make that safe, so that we don't lose another life or have another life significantly impacted by this.
What about these individuals? 2 dead, a 39-year-old man, a 17-year-old boy today, and then the 40-year-old woman and a 75-year-old woman, Hispanic woman, who are in critical condition tonight. Is there any connection that you can see between these individuals?
You know, first I want to say my heart goes out to these families. This is just an unexplainable tragedy at this point. And that's exactly what we're looking at now. What can we piece together about these 3 individuals to determine if there's something that connects them? Right now, we have not yet identified any ideology that may be behind this or any specific link between these victims. And so that's really at the core of what we're working on right now, trying to piece it together on top of the evidence collection and all of the analysis that will be done on that.
Let me ask you this, Chief. In terms of what was on the package, is there handwriting on the package that has their address? Were these packages addressed to someone in the home that lived there? Did it have their name on it?
So we are keeping some of these details private right now for the integrity of the investigation, as this would be information that really is only known to the suspect or suspects in this incident. And again, that's why we're highlighting to the community here that if you see something that looks suspicious or out of place, or if you had a package delivered that you weren't expecting, just give us a call and let us come and clear it first.
And, you know, so now this person, whoever's doing this, or this group of people, obviously they know that you guys are on to what's going on, and I imagine you're going to be, are you upping your patrol, your presence on the streets all around Austin tonight? What's your plan?
So we are obviously having our patrol officers be vigilant in the neighborhoods. They, in addition to all the neighbors that we're asking to look out for anything suspicious, our officers will be looking as well for something that looks out of place or looks suspicious. But there is a level of attention and a level of involvement by our federal partners here in Austin that we've not seen before. The number of ATF and FBI agents that have come into Austin to assist us with this investigation. The governor himself has put a $15,000 reward out there for any information leading to a closure of this case. And then we've also had assistance given to us from many of our local partners as well. We are all working together so that we can clear this as quickly as possible before we lose any more life or have any more life seriously impacted.
It's really terrifying. Thank you so much. Good to have you here tonight, Chief Manley, and we'll be watching your story. We hope you'll keep us posted. We got to find this guy. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Martha. I appreciate it.
You bet. Danny Colson joins me now, former Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI and a hostage rescue team commander. Danny, good evening to you. You listened to this story, listened to the chief. What are you picking up here in the tea leaves so far?
First place, that was an excellent briefing by the chief of police. You don't often see that. He did an outstanding job getting the people in Austin notified that of the danger. And this case will be solved by public assistance, I feel quite sure. Right now, he mentioned this, and I know it to be true, that ATF and the FBI and their JTF and also the Austin PD are putting a full court press on this. And there are a lot of things going to be done. Remember, the FBI solved the Boston Marathon bombing in a couple of days. This may take a little longer, but they will solve this case, and it will be done a lot by public assistance and the saturation that law enforcement puts in these types of events.
Yeah, you know, you think of the Unabomber who the chief mentioned. I also think of the DC sniper, because you've got this fear of just a random acts potentially that are happening anywhere in your city, and you don't know where it's going to happen or if it might happen to you. It's really terrifying for anybody who lives in that area to touch anything, I would imagine, coming in your mail.
Well, we want them to be afraid. I mean, that sounds a little sinister maybe, but we want them to be very much aware of the threat to them. And I think it's interesting that all these are at residences and not in public places. Generally, a terrorist or someone bent on making a statement will put it in a public place for more carnage. The fact that it was done at a home, I think that will maybe the focus of the investigation by both the FBI and the APD. And I will tell you, I managed the Unabomber, and we only caught him because he wanted his manifesto published. Before that, we had no clue who he was. So these things are difficult.
And that took 18 months.
Yes, no, years.
I mean, it's incredible. You know, this person is good at what they do, no doubt, because these he appears to be 3 for 3 at this point.
It does, and the chief said this, the trick to this thing, and when you talk about sophistication, is that it doesn't go off in your hand, or it doesn't go off in your car as you're transporting it, and obviously it's some sort of a pressure switch, and the person knows what he or she is doing, and that makes it even more sinister. And if we get a message out, Martha, if you find something on your front porch, don't touch it, call the police, no matter if it's a pasteboard box or a wooden container or whatever, just be really careful.
It's a tall order for the police. I mean, if you have any packages with Amazon, all this stuff, everything comes to your house. It's the only way people get things these days. They're going to be chasing after these boxes all the time. It's going to be insane, I would imagine.
Yeah, but remember, these were not delivered by Amazon or FedEx. It's just a package
dropped on the
with
front
nothing
porch
on it that would identify. So that limits it to some degree.
You bet. Danny, thank you very much. Got to catch this person,
thank you. It's always
individuals, whoever
Thanks.
it is. It's good to see you too, sir. Thank you. So coming up, we've got another Fox News alert for you tonight. The House Intel Committee has completed their Russia investigation, and they say that they found no evidence after all of their interviews that there was any collusion with Russia by either campaign. Corey Lewandowski just appeared before the committee. His reaction to the breaking news tonight coming up next. And Hillary Clinton now telling an international audience that she lost because white women were just voting the way their husbands and their bosses and their sons told them to. Former senior advisor to Hillary Clinton, Philippe Reines, and also Karl Rove will jump in to respond to that and the Pennsylvania race as well tonight after this break.
I really feel strongly about Rick Saccone, and I know him. I feel strongly about him. He's a very fine human being. He's a good person. Go out on Tuesday and just vote like crazy. You got to get out there.
Vote like crazy. Breaking tonight, we are just 12 hours away from voting to begin in what is turning out to be one of the most highly anticipated races this year so far. President Trump held a raucous rally over the weekend for Republican candidate Rick Saccone. Today, his son, Donald Jr., was campaigning there as well. Both fighting to keep a congressional district outside Pittsburgh from turning blue. And this is a district that now President Trump won by 20 points in 2016. So this should not even really be in play for Republicans. The latest Monmouth polling shows a very tight race, 45% Saccone, 51% for Connor Lamb as we head into Election Day, which is tomorrow. So joining me now, Karl Rove, former senior advisor to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor, and Philippe Reines, a former senior advisor to Hillary Clinton. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see both of you, as always. So, Karl, you know, they're really pulling out a lot of money and the big guns from Washington and from the White House to try to pull him across the finish line.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the Democrats have the picture-perfect candidate, a former Marine, a prosecutor, somebody who says he won't support Nancy Pelosi, that he's personally opposed to abortion, applauding things of President Trump with which he agrees, not the normal Democrat. And the Republican has been underwhelming. But if Saccone wins, it's going to be because Donald Trump came in at the end and campaign for him. If he loses, it will be because the president's approval ratings, even in this district, are not particularly high. They're certainly not where they ought to be for somebody in their a year and a half into office.
Yeah. Philippe, what's your take on this? Because this clearly should not have been a battle for a Republican in this district.
No, it shouldn't. And I think just a shorthand what Karl just said, it's clear the president doesn't have any coattails. And while we'll be hearing that talking point again about Connor Lamb being an exceptional candidate, which he absolutely is, the truth of the matter is that it shouldn't come to this. And more importantly, that if it comes to this repeatedly in November, the Republican Party can't put in the resources, can't put in $10 million into dozens and dozens of close races. And, you know, it's not a good sign, even if Saccone pulls it out by a couple of points. I would not feel good if I were the head of the RNC.
Yeah, how does this reflect on the work that the GOP has done, Karl? Because we've been hearing for months that this is all about candidates, that they need really strong candidates in all of these places.
Well, I'm involved with a super PAC that's active on the Senate side, and there are limits to what these outside groups can do. At the end of the day, the principal reason a candidate gets close to winning or wins is because of the candidate and the campaign's organization. Outside groups can help lift them up 3 or 4 or 5 points, but they can't get them from 0 to 51. I want to comment on something quickly that Philippe said. You know, Democrats are going to find it hard to duplicate Connor Lamb. We saw it here in Texas, for example. The preferred candidate in one of their best shots to pick up a Republican seat, it was in West Texas, a guy named Jay Hullings, former prosecutor, military background, spent $500,000, was beaten by somebody who spent $600,000, who moved back to the district after something like 18 years in Washington, 6 months before the election, and he actually came in fourth. Hullings came in fourth behind a guy who spent $20,000 and another candidate who spent $30,000. So why? Because he wasn't a typical Democrat. The typical Democrat this year tends to be far more left-wing than either Hullings or Lamb.
Yeah, and it is about a candidate. They have to pull themselves across the finish line in the end in all of these cases. Here's President Trump over the weekend talking about his new 2020 campaign slogan. Watch this.
Our new slogan, when we start running in, can you believe it, 2 years from now, is going to be Keep America Great, exclamation point. Keep America great.
Philippe loves those exclamation points. You know, we see them all over Twitter all the time. You say that just watching him over the weekend, that you could see him winning again.
Oh, yeah, I mean, once he won on election night, I could see that. I mean, it's, and Karl has better success rate at this than I do, but it seems to be harder to win the office than to keep the office. If you go back as far as Richard Nixon, 5 of our last 7 presidents who sought a second term won it. And it comes with some built-in advantages, and you saw some of them the other night. Frankly, I think the president prefers to campaign like that. I was a little surprised that keeping America great was no surprise. I'm a little surprised about the exclamation point, because to the extent that there is a Donald Trump tweet for everything, I am sure there is one making fun of Jeb Bush with the, Jeb exclamation point.
No, there's a lot of exclamation points in those tweets. I do want to get to this because I saw this from Hillary today, and I was a bit taken aback by it. She's at an India Today conclave, and she was speaking, and here's what she said. She said, "What happened in my election, I was on the way to winning white women until former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, dropped that ill-advised letter. Then down my numbers went." all of a sudden, white women who were going to vote for me and standing up to the men in their lives were told she's going to jail. And what we don't have here is that the top of this, which is what I found the most striking actually in the whole thing, was that she said that white women voted the way that their husbands and their bosses and their sons told them to, which I think a lot of women will take great offense to, Philippe.
Carl, do you want to take this one?
No, it's for you, Philippe.
I'm going to let you try to defend it first, and
What do
then
you
I'll
got?
respond.
Well, I'll invoke Carl on the one front and explain on the other. This is something she has said before, and I think, you know, the Secretary Clinton seems to definitely trigger people when she answers questions about what happened in the election, and she thinks out loud. In this particular case, she's talking about an Oregon State study that does look at this fact, and I understand why that would come across as insulting. Obviously, that's not how she meant it.
Imagine all of those women who elected this president, Carl,
Well,
being told that they voted that way because their husbands and their bosses. I mean, this is a woman who has fought for women's rights and women's power as long as she's been in politics. I couldn't believe that she actually said that, Carl.
Carl, help me out here.
I can't either, frankly. Look, this is a reminder of why she was such a terrible candidate.
Come on.
You know, the deplorables and insults. And look, if you look at the polls from and I'm not a fan of Jim Comey's, but if you look at between that Friday announcement and the election, there's very little change in the polls. And somehow to suggest that white women, moved away from her because of Jim Comey's remarks on Friday that were undone on Monday is ridiculous. But the whole concept that women who voted against her were told to do so by their husbands or their bosses or their children, and women who voted for her did so out of, you know, sort of, I don't know what. It just is jaw-droppingly tone deaf, arrogant, condescending, and stupid. Strong message to follow.
Just to correct one thing, Carl, you're skipping 10 days in between. It wasn't Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was a week and a half before, and the numbers did change overnight.
No. But on Friday, Comey comes out and says we've reopened, and on Monday they say never mind. We checked over the weekend.
It was not the same weekend.
I know, and there's 10 days more to go. There's 8 more days to go after that. But the pause between that Friday and Tuesday.
I want to hear from all those women who voted just because their husbands and their bosses and their sons told them to. I just think it's great.
Oregon State. Look up the Oregon State study.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Good to see you both. All right, we have this breaking news tonight as well. Watch this.
We could find no evidence of collusion between either campaign and the Russians.
The House Intel Committee says they're done with their work. They've spent a year investigating, and they have their findings. They've done numerous interviews with witnesses. They say they didn't find any collusion, not only between the Trump campaign and Russia, but between the Clinton campaign and Russia. Former Trump 2016 campaign manager Corey Lewandowski has testified in front of this committee twice, and he is live here next. And then, in the wake of a series of fraternity hazing deaths on college campuses, one university now charges that a sorority is just as bad. Next.
The big piece of the puzzle that everybody has been talking about, which is one of the reasons why your investigation was struck in the first place, no collusion that you found.
No evidence.
No evidence of collusion between
right.
the Trump campaign and the Russians.
Or the Clinton campaign.
How confident are you of that?
Well, we've found none.
That was Congressman Mike Conaway announcing the House Intelligence Committee's Russia investigation has ended. There are others, as you know, on the Hill, but his committee says this in part, quote, "We have found no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians," as he basically just said there. The committee has conducted more than 70 interviews during its probe, including just last week, former manager of President Trump's 2016 campaign, Corey Lewandowski. Corey joins us now. He also serves as chief strategist of America First Action, a Trump super PAC. Corey, good to have you here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So this is obviously something that you've been saying all along, that you believed that there was no collusion. I just want to put up what Adam Schiff has said now in response. And he says, while the majority members of our committee have indicated for some time that they have been under great pressure to end the investigation, it is nonetheless another tragic milestone for this Congress and represents yet another capitulation of the executive to the executive branch. He would like you to come in for the third round, Mr. Schiff.
You know, it's amazing. I sat voluntarily before the committee for a total of more than 12 hours, answering every question that they had about what I saw during my tenure at the Trump campaign. And I was very clear. I never interacted with Russians. The candidate never interacted with Russians. There was no collusion. There was no cooperation. And there was no coordination. And I could have had my testimony done in 5 minutes because it was very simple. I didn't coordinate with anybody to impact the outcome of the election that was a foreign entity. So, but, you know, Mr. Schiff wants to use this as a bully pulpit for him. I sat there on Thursday of last week and said, before I get up and leave, I've been here for 4.5 hours. Are there any additional questions before I get up and go home and see my family? And there were no additional questions. So this notion that he wants to grandstand and have people come back and talk some more, he had all the time in the world on Thursday to ask me as many questions as he wanted, and he had no more questions. That's the bottom line, because there was no collusion.
I mean, there's 2 pages of pictures that we could put up that they have talked to. So the suggestion that they haven't been thorough, I think, is going to be kind of tough for them to sell here. And they've been at it for a year, which I think most people would consider a fairly reasonable amount of time. And there's other investigations that are ongoing, as we know. But he says he might subpoena you because you were selective, that you cherry-picked what you would answer and wouldn't answer. Would you comply with that subpoena, Corey?
Well, look, it's not up to Adam Schiff to subpoena me. It's up to the majority, and the majority knows I answered every question that was relevant to their investigation. I sat there for 12 hours, and I answered all of their questions. They've interviewed 73 people before the committee, and what Chairman Conaway has said was he saw no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and for that matter, between the Clinton campaign and the Russians. But what we haven't seen, as you know, is a list of 73 Democrats, including Robbie Mook and all the members of the Clinton campaign, who've had to come in and testify before this committee. Why didn't that occur? Because the only campaign that I know of that took money out of the campaign coffers and paid a former spy was the Clinton campaign, and he took that money and went to Russia to create a false dossier. That's what really took place, and the House Investigation Committee never looked at that issue that I'm aware of.
You know, obviously Sam Nunberg has been out a lot, and he's said a few things about you. I could play probably 30 seconds of it, but here's just like 7 seconds. Here's a snippet. You get the idea. Let's play it.
Corey was so lazy, he couldn't organize a campaign. He could organize a foreign policy division.
You guys get along really well, right? You fired him twice, right?
Well, I fired him twice, and I think if anybody knows me, that there's a lot of things you can say about me. Lazy is not one of them. I'm usually up around 4 in the morning to try and keep up with then-candidate Trump, going to bed at 11 or 12 at night. I don't think the same could have been said for Mr. Nunberg. And look, you know, unfortunately for Mr. Nunberg, what he said, and these are his own words, he was going to testify in front of the grand jury on Friday, which he did. Then he was going to check himself into rehab. Clearly, he has some substance abuse issues that he needs to deal with, and I think he should take care of those for his own health.
All right, last thought. I wonder if you heard the Hillary Clinton quote. Basically, she was speaking at a conference in India, and we're working on getting that sound. Hopefully we'll have it soon. But she said that women who voted for President Trump did so because they basically were pressured by their husbands, their bosses, and their sons. That's why they voted for him. What's your response to that, having been on the campaign trail for all of those months?
You know, it's so outrageous to say such a thing. The bottom line was Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. And can you imagine what the mainstream media would be saying right now if Donald Trump or another Republican said the exact same thing, that women aren't intelligent enough to make their own decisions and that the only way they can decide who to vote for is if their husbands, their son, or their male bosses tell them who to do so? It is such a disgusting thing. This is supposed to have been a person who has fought her entire life to destroy the glass ceiling, that was going to have fireworks on election night to destroy the glass ceiling in New York, and now she makes this type of statement with no backlash. I hope women around this country stand up and tell her how wrong she is.
Yeah, so she thinks only Democrat women speak their mind. So anyway, that's her opinion. Thank you, Corey. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
You bet. So still ahead, this is fascinating. The Amelia Earhart mystery may finally be solved. A new clue that could close the case on what happened to her. But first, more than a year after the death of Penn State fraternity pledge Timothy Piazza, whose parents you know well and have seen here many times, one university is now crossing the line and banishing a sorority. They're accused as being pretty much just as bad as the boys. Governor Mike Huckabee on the culture in our country that is creating this awful scenario. Next.